My name is Marcelo Knobel. I am the Executive Director of the World Academy of Science. I will explain just a little bit about it in a few moments. But before starting, I would like to say that I feel also very proud and very happy to be here, as Martin mentioned before. But at the same time, I felt like leaving our group therapy session. I am a bit depressed right now. So this is the kind of work that we do, and it's extremely complicated. From the personal point of view, also it was all the experiences that were shared before. They are really very, common to me. I was born. Well, let me say a few things before. I am the third generation in my family that are immigrants from different places. My grandparents went from Europe to America at the beginning of the 20th century, escaping from hunger. I believe they thought that they were going to New York, then ended up in Buenos Aires. So it was America anyway. I don't even know if they knew about Buenos Aires before, but they ended up there. They made a life. My father was born there, and he became a scholar, a well-known psychiatrist in Argentina. And due to a military coup that happened in 1976, he was expelled from the university, and he had to escape from the country. My brothers as well, they had to run because they were really, really in danger. And I was 8 years old, and then I went with my parents to Brazil. I don't know what happened, my father's ideas, but Brazil was also a dictatorship at that time. So he escaped from one to the other. It was different, let's say, but he was promised that the University of Campinas, where we ended up, that he would be protected. The academic freedom will be protected. And in fact, this indeed happened. And the person who built the university there in Brazil, this University of Campinas, and managed to have all the immigrants from different dictatorships in Latin America to build a new university, by the way, is now one of the best in Latin America, according to any of these rankings and so on. So I grew up there. I became a physics professor. I started working at the university and ended up being the director and having this, administrative path. And now an opportunity appeared, and I emigrated to Italy. So I am now in Trieste, Italy, leading this World Academy of Sciences to us. So it's a complicated history because, as I mentioned, I lived not only one, but two dictatorships, and a principle of dictatorship in Brazil as well in the last term, that it was really, really complicated. So many of the things that you were discussing, I faced in Brazil like a rector of the university that was under a huge attack every single day. So it was really, really complex time. And my term ended during the pandemic. So you can imagine it was really, really, I don't know if it can be called bad luck, but probably not. It's something that we are all facing. And by the way, you cannot take for granted that the democracy is there. So we sometimes are really watching on real time the destruction of a democracy, and we feel like powerless. We feel like we cannot do anything. And indeed, what we have here is something really, really important to discuss, but at the same time also depressing, because we are not seeing a huge number of journalists among us. Just to mention, the impact. So we are like preaching to the converted already. So we know what's happening, but we have somehow to reach society. And we are not doing this job properly, in my personal opinion. So this is something that we should eventually discuss. I am now at TWAS. As I mentioned, TWAS was built, for those who doesn't know, and this is indeed another issue which I find really, really interesting, because we are like in several, even in parallel worlds, sometimes the science sector with the university sector that would be, I transit in both because I was a rector. I would go to conference of rectors and they don't even know about the Academy of Sciences, so it's something that they are not connected. And TWAS was built 40 years ago by the Nobel Prize winner Abdul Salam, who was from Pakistan, and I really don't know how he managed to convince the Italian government at that time to pass a law to not only to create ICTP. 60 years ago, ICTP is the International Center of Theoretical and Physics, but also 40 years ago, he convinced the Italian government that it would be nice to have a World Academy of Science for the Global South, for the developing countries. And indeed, we are located in Italy, in Trieste, because the Italian government gives a core funding in order to make the infrastructure work. Now we are a session of the science session of UNESCO, and in fact, during these 40 years, we grew a lot, and we are not only an academy, but we do a lot of partnerships, capacity building programs, mobility programs, and grants and awards, and a lot of activities that we managed to have during that period. If you never heard about TWAS, it's just take a look on twas.org and you will have an idea. So I would like to go through the session. We discussed it. Of course, I would have many things to share with you, but I think it's enough. It's time to hear what our fellow panelists will talk about, and then we discuss it beforehand, and the idea is to make very brief presentations, about 10 minutes. I will be a little bit condescending as well, so we can accommodate a little bit more. But of course, idea is having 10 minutes presentation each, and then having enough time, almost an hour, for discussion. That I think this is the strength of this particular meeting. So without further doing, let's call the first panelist, who is Vivi Stavrou, Executive Secretary of the Committee for Freedom and Responsibility in Science from the International Science Council. So thank you very much.
So thank you for the introduction. And I'm going to give my talk through the lens of the International Science Council, a global membership organization of 250 plus academies, science institutions, associations from the natural, social sciences, medicine, and engineering. Now, the world needs science more than ever, but science is vulnerable. Science has played a major role in improving our quality of life, deepening our understandings of who we are and the world we live in. Science and technology are also developed and used in ways which harm our health, worsen inequality, and deepen conflict. Nation states are currently putting greater emphasis on science and technology as competitive strategic assets. In this complex and polarized world, the ability of scientists to conduct research freely and safely is under pressure. Now, I'm going to talk about the Committee for Freedom and Responsibility of Science, for which I work. It's a statutory committee and is the guardian of the International Science Council's, the ISC's, principle of freedom and responsibility in science. The committee's role is to provide thought leadership on developing ISC's normative framework, and has recently spent time on expanding on these notions, as well as elaborating on the right to participate in and benefit from science. Now, CFRS, part of the work that CFRS does is to monitor and respond to cases worldwide which threaten the free and responsible practice of science and the effective exercise of the right to participate in and benefit from science. These cases involve individual scientists whose freedoms and rights are restricted as a result of carrying out their scientific research. So a slightly more limited notion, as well as cases concerning the irresponsible practice of science. The committee also monitors more generic cases, broader, thematic, disciplinary, national-level threats to the free and responsible practice of science. Examples in terms of these more generic cases include national-level threats of scientific and academic governance and to teaching and research-producing institutions, as well as existential threats related to severe crises such as natural disasters and wars. Monitoring done by the ISC, by Scholars at Risk, the Academic Freedom Index, and UNESCO highlight a disturbing increase in attacks on scholars, scientific research institutions, and higher education communities. These threats are not isolated incidents. They are systemic vulnerabilities exacerbated by global crises. The overarching trend is that scientific and academic freedoms are declining around the world. This graph is taken from the latest Academic Freedom Index, 2014, and you can see that global average academic freedom scores have been regressing over the past 10 years, values reminiscent of the Cold War era. What we see driving this downward trend is the rise of authoritarianism around the world, meaning more frequent instances of government interference in institutional autonomy, and the targeting and suppressing of scientists whose research conflicts with political and economic agendas. And it's these cases that we see the most of in the last couple of years. Ideologically motivated attacks have risen. We see the politicization of scientific issues and disinformation campaigns undermining trust in science and scientists. Such threats are often coupled with physical and digital threats. Online harassment, particularly targeting women and researchers working on topics like climate change, is a growing problem. A 2013 survey by Global Witness found that nearly 40% of climate scientists experienced online harassment and violent threats related to their research. Gender-based threats continue. According to a 2023 Ipsos study, 1 in 2 women scientists have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. These vulnerabilities disproportionately affect early career scientists and underrepresented groups, further eroding the diversity and strength of our global scientific community. We see global trends for defunding science, especially the social sciences. Financial pressures and budget cuts, of course, force researchers out of the field, jeopardize the existence and continued scholarship of whole fields of science. It's a serious issue, and this tactic effectively violates the right to participate in and benefit from science. Geopolitical conflicts or tensions have been increasing, which brings restrictions on movement and international scientific collaboration, but also an increase in wars that pose existential threats to the safety and survival of scientists and entire science ecosystems and cultures. The impact of conflict on science systems is catastrophic. Science systems are targets in war. They tend to sort of come soon after you bomb the bridges and the factories, and are deliberately targeted to weaken a nation's war efforts and future. Scientists and scholars are often among the first to lose their jobs, become displaced, imprisoned, or killed. Ongoing political instability and conflicts can sever international collaborations and halt critical research, with a ripple effect on all of us, a ripple effect on global knowledge. Conflict can benefit some areas of science hugely, as they are critical to the war effort. Conflict also creates a climate of fear that stifles scientific inquiry and collaboration. The incidence of natural disasters like earthquakes, floods, and fires are increasing and equally have a devastating effect on research infrastructure and on scientists. And as with prolonged conflict and war, not only are long-term research projects disrupted, but so is the very urgent research needed for the moment, critical for disaster prevention and recovery. But these threats are external to the science system. They're exacerbated internally by indications that fraud and misconduct in science are on the rise, most obviously seen in scientific publishing and the worries we have there, the widespread silencing and intimidation of whistleblowers in scientific institutions, and by the fact that despite much progress in many parts of the world, discrimination of all kinds remains systemic in science. Now, let me put this into perspective. The ISC has got limited capacity, and we only take on cases brought on by our members. And it's worth to note that overall, the state is the aggressor in the vast majority of cases. Now, CFRS also runs a variety of projects, and I want to highlight the one in red, Science in Times of Crisis program. Now, this program seeks to convene the Council's members and partners to respond to the multiple crises affecting the scientific community. You can see most of it is focused on advocacy, actions, and statements from the ISC and from the Committee for Freedom and Responsibility in Science. And we've done various of those around different wars, the constriction of the space for campus boycotts, the impact of conflict and polarization on international scientific collaboration. We also do a series of science-based articles on the impact of war in Gaza, in Sudan, on Afghanistan. We work very closely with the Inter-Academy Partnership and also with TWAS on a Science in Exile initiative and on a declaration, and as much as possible try and advocate in this space. During crises, we've also convened through the Science in Exile initiative, the Science Stakeholders Crisis Group. We've activated that a few times. This is a time-limited multi-stakeholder platform for information exchange and support during crises. A lot of it brings our members together. 2 examples, we activated it for a couple of months when the Taliban came back in Afghanistan, and also with the radical escalation of the war in Ukraine in 2022. And our efforts in Ukraine, together with our European partners, resulted in 2 conferences with Ukrainian scientists, where we looked at the impact of war on the science systems and science in Ukraine, and then also international efforts to support Ukrainian science and scientists. In this work, we collaborate very closely with some of the partners that I mentioned, as well as the NGOs that have a specific mandate to work with at-risk, displaced, and refugee scientists. Now, in doing this work, we identified a gap that the scientific community is excellent at researching crises, but neglects looking at how crises impact upon the community itself, its systems and its institutions. And from the need to know more about this, We wrote this report, Protecting Science in Times of Crisis. How can we stop being reactive and become proactive? More proactive. There's currently no global framework, unlike for education and culture, in which to understand the long-term needs of science systems, which can help frame both preventative and emergency measures, as well as post-crisis rebuilding priorities and strategies for science. And when I talk about crises, we base this talk on case studies, fires in Brazil and in Rio and Cape Town, and the impact on science, war, the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, wars in Iraq, Ukraine, and the Balkans. What this study and other work in this area showed us that while existing support systems are critical, there are significant gaps that I've listed here. And the reports not only list these gaps, but also provide very practical, doable recommendations of how to move forward. So, for example, the last one in terms of data deficiencies on the prevalence and nature of threats to scientists and science, we've worked together with the Committee for Data and UNESCO to begin the development of a data policy for times of crisis. Now, what are some of the overall lessons we've learned in terms of opportunities for collective action? The first is to recognize our context, that the prevailing context within which we are seeing the global declines in academic freedom is one of polycrisis, where war, natural and other disasters, including pandemics, rapidly increasing social inequality, are the global context and the new norm. International solidarity and taking responsibility are critical. There's no coincidence that solidarity has come up so often in our discussion, where governments, the higher education and science community must work together to deliver on their national commitments. And those commitments exist almost in every single country of the world, on paper at least. Commitments to recognizing and adequately supporting the right to education and science within their country, and this includes supporting the participation of at-risk scholars in their home country or in a second or third country if necessary. We need to be prepared. We cannot wait and reinvent the protection and support mechanisms every time there's a new disaster, a new war takes place. We need to develop guiding principles and frameworks for effective action. We've got these. We just haven't unified and standardized this effort. And we also need to protect our workplaces, to train members of scientific societies, academies, research-producing institutions to identify and respond to threats against their colleagues, to act against the irresponsible conduct of science, to make sure that we have formal routes to protect and support whistleblowers in science. Research on whistleblowers, by the way, 2024 research shows that it remains the biggest way that fraud and misconduct is uncovered. Now, we need courage, raising awareness about the importance of scientific freedom and the plight of threatened colleagues, condemning attacks on science, advocating for policies that protect academic freedom. Engaging with governments requires courage in the current political and funding environment. The challenges we have as a scientific community in this space, sorry, I'm talking scientific community rather than broader academic community, significant challenges. The lack of political will and awareness of problems within our communities, and here I'm talking about the scientific community, limited resources, further threatened by defunding, institutional risk aversion, the tension between responsible advocacy and neutrality, the fear of personal and political backlash when speaking out, and genuinely inadequate data on the scale of threats and affected individuals. So in conclusion, the threats are real, support networks are vital, but significant challenges remain. The scientific community has a long history of supporting its members, but the scale of the challenge requires a new level of commitment and coordination. And it's our collective responsibility to act with courage and solidarity. Thank you.
Now we will call Hafte Gebrihet, Associate Professor, Western Norway University of Applied Science, and Fellow from Scholars at Risk. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you very much for inviting me, because each and every presentation, and especially the last presentation, I was in each and every line of the presentation because of my situation. That's why it says that I'm from the Scholars at Risk, or at the Scholars at Risk. So today, what I'm going to present is about the stark choice between silence and exile, looking at the academic repression and transnational control in the digital age. So you're not going to see like a robust findings like which was presented before me, but you're going to see myself in each and every presentation. But if I get an opportunity to do a deep research in this academic repression and how this transnational control is really activated in this digital age, I'll be happy to do. So to start with, our relationship with the government. When I say our relationship, the academic work, the journalists' work, and the relationship between us and the political power has been defined by tension. The level of tension may differ from region to region, from country to country, from continent to continent, but it has been defined by tension. If you see in terms of democratic settings like Norway, independent research can strengthen accountability. It can strengthen rule of law. It can strengthen transparency and support reform. But the exact same research, but in a different context, in a different region, like the authoritarian regimes, this output can be perceived as a threat against national unity, a threat against territorial integrity or sovereignty. So when the independent research challenges the authority, challenges the dictator governments, scholars face this stark choice. That's silent and then survive, raise your children, support your family. When death comes, you die with the society. That's one choice. The second one is you resist it, you challenge it, and you risk imprisonment. You risk exile or expelled from your country, or even the worst, that's death. That's why I chose the second one. I risk imprisonment. I was arrested at Addis Ababa International Airport when I was leaving to South Africa to do my PhD. They expelled me from my country to South Africa. That was not even enough for them. They traced me all the way in South Africa, and I had to apply for Scholars at Risk Network, which I survived. I'm here. But I'm alive. So my story, my own experience as an emerging Ethiopian scholar reflects this dilemma which I stated. Between 2021, basically late 2020 and early 2021 and 2025, I have published in academic and public works on corruption, especially on identity politics and how that identity politics become an eclipse or a blanket cover to systemic corruption in Africa, which were published as a book chapter. At the same time, it was published as op-ed in South Africa, one of the digital Daily Maverick, South Africa. I published it on polarization, especially how ethnic polarization is really affecting trust between national and regional governments. I published it on humanitarian crisis, the dynamics of humanitarian diplomacy in Ethiopia during the wartime, and the war, food insecurity. I was engaged also not only scholarly, but also as an academic audience. Like I was interviewed by major outlets, including the Human Rights Watch, to talk about the war and how the war is just how the federal government is using famine or using food, using electricity, telecommunication as a weapon of war during the 2020, from 2020 to 2020 in Ethiopia, Tigray region. So I was interviewed by Human Rights Watch. I was interviewed by BBC, Tigrinya, and Amharic. I was interviewed by the South African Broadcasting Corporate to discuss about the war, and the government. What the government did wasn't like to disprove my work or wasn't to disprove my interview. It was rather to criminalize my work. Therefore, my engagement was so to bring transparency to the study of the Ethiopian political transition between 2018 and 2020, and also drawing an attention to the systematic crisis. So what was the consequence of my critique to the government? The first thing, my public critique to the corruption, to the authoritarian governance, regional conflict, attracted the attention of state authorities, of course. So the government did not attempt to disprove my work. It rather criminalized under the hate speech and disinformation proclamation 1185, and which was published in adopted in 2020. So when I talk about corruption, it is against national security and territorial integrity of the state. But when the federal government, when the prime minister, when his advisors, when the regional presidents talk about the Tigray people, about how the people are considered as a weed which has to be removed, we're saying the daylight hyena. We're saying about they will be taking them back to the 100 years back. That wasn't a hate speech. That wasn't a disinformation. But when we were trying to fight against the human rights violation, when we were trying to expose the gender-based violence, which was intentionally and conducted by the government, that was a hate speech and a disinformation, and were considered as treason and against national security and territorial integrity of the state. So I was accused by that, and I just I had to go to South Africa and later on to Norway. Therefore, this is the dilemma. And people are in this choice. I have so many friends in Ethiopia who've been in this dilemma. So the choice between have I be silent and then raise my children and then survive, keep quiet, or the exile, which is a deliberate mechanism of authoritarian control. So remaining silent secures your safety for a short period of time, but you're sacrificing an academic integrity, intellectual integrity. And speaking out preserves the truth. You are telling the truth, but you risk a persecution. You risk your life. You risk your family. So many journalists have been the victims of this hate speech and disinformation proclamation. And it has become a mechanism for criminalizing the work of academics and journalists. Of course, I'm just talking about Ethiopia, but this has a structural pattern. You will hear this structural pattern. You will find it in Uganda. You might find it in Tanzania. You might find it to some extent in Kenya. You might find it in Uganda. So what is this digital age bringing about? Is it bringing an opportunity for us to talk, or is it bringing a risk for us to keep silent? Of course, the digital era has changed the train of this repression. The social media platforms allow us scholars, allow journalists and citizens to bypass the state-controlled media. We're not limited to the state-controlled media now, and share evidence of abuse, evidence of human rights violation, and we can mobilize solidarity. For those who are in exile like me, this digital platform provides a way to challenge the government's control over the truth. However, it has a risk. The exact same technology has become tools of authoritarian power as well. It just become again a surveillance to monitor what we're doing, what we are posting, what we are commenting, and even they are trying to check our private messages through the highly trained and deployed cadres. So there are cadre deployment on Facebook, you will see with a fake account, but they are spying you. On Twitter or X, you will see they have a fake account, but they are spying you. That's how I was spied, actually. When I was living at Addis Ababa, they recorded everything of my Facebook, my Twitter, and every account, and they warned me, if I give any information to any media outlet, I'm risking my family, because my family were behind me. I only met them actually after 4 years. I even didn't know my little girl, my little daughter. My wife was pregnant when I was leaving the country, and she recently joined me here in Norway. Thank you to the Norwegian government and the Scholars at Risk Network. Therefore, the evidence collected online is used even in the court against defendants. Like when the defendants start in the court, they just say, you say this on social media, we checked your private message, and you said, they just become even an evidence. Therefore, this exile provides no immunity, since critics abroad are harassed online and their family and at home are targeted. Recently, I posted on Facebook critiquing the federal government. And my little brother was just commenting that, mind your business. He knew the problem in Ethiopia, but he said, mind your business, which means don't post, you are targeting us. And I immediately deleted it, because I can't risk my family. Therefore, this exile give us a half opportunity, or I could say unsustainable safety. I'm safe now, but I don't know about tomorrow. Because I'm not even quite sure if I will get my contract extended or not. I was given a 2 years contract and said that your contract is expiring now, you have to go back to your country. Now I'm just even more exposed. Because I get this opportunity, I get this freedom, I start writing, I just become even in the eyes of each and every members of the dictator. If I go back now, they are going to sharpening their knife, ready for me to slaughter me. Therefore, even this exile is not sustainable. It is not sustaining the freedom I got for the last two years. So why am I discussing even about this? What is the main takeaway of my presentation? The dilemma of silence and exile reveals the fragility of this intellectual freedom under authoritarianism. But should we be silent? Should we be hopeless about academic freedom? No. To preserve this knowledge production, international solidarity and institutional protections are necessary, and it has to be sustainable. Thank you very much.
We will keep going with Saja Zoubi, Professor of Development Studies, Dalhousie University, Canada. She is co-lead at the At-Risk Scholar Initiative, Global Young Academy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. Actually, it's such an honor to be with you today. So, actually, my presentation today, the plan is to as it mentions about academic freedom as a pillar of peace building and justice, supporting at-risk scholars. So the plan is to highlight the connection between academic freedom and supporting at-risk scholars to actually to build sustainable peace and justice. So emphasizing how freedom, academic freedom, and supporting the knowledge of those at-risk scholars together forms actually this body or this combination form the pillar or the foundation of peace and justice, especially for those countries who suffering conflict or even post-conflict. But due to the new or to updated news that came from Halifax yesterday, so I will make a little bit switch and I will highlight two cases actually. One which is really bright and I would like to share it with you, and the other is a bit gloomy, and that's what we're gonna start with. Actually, as Marcelo just mentioned, that I'm professor of development studies at Dalhousie University. Dalhousie University in Halifax, Canada is considered the largest Atlantic university in Canada. So it's one of the biggest in the North America, actually. And several months ago, there was a negotiation between Dalhousie Faculty Association and the governors and Dalhousie board in Halifax for fair contracts. And then we got alarmed that if you go ahead with the strike, that means all faculty will get locked out. And actually, I didn't take this seriously at all. And even when we were circulating our personal emails and Dalhousie emails and how to make what we should as pictures, what we should do, our duties and assignments to in the strike, I didn't pay any attention to that because it doesn't make sense for me that faculty, the whole faculty, will be locked out. In 20 August, I recognized that I have no access to my Dalhousie email. I can't go to the Bright Space, and I don't get the payment from Dalhousie. Literally, I'm locked out. Not only me, with more than 1,000 professors, librarians are locked out of Dalhousie until today. Yesterday, they started the negotiation because the governors, they had no time to sit with us at the table and discuss this. The discussions started yesterday, and hopefully we can get something. So I just brought this abroad to the board, actually, just to imagine what kind of academic freedom that we talk about. Even it's just like this, it's a piece of cake just to look out 1,000 faculty, 1,000 professors, just because they ask for better circumstances. And the other thing, which is the bright thing that I want to share with you. Actually, yesterday I came from Oxford after 2 full days with an Global Young Academy workshop to develop the skills of at-risk scholars who are based in UK. And this organization that I led, and it's annual actually organization since 2019, Global Young Academy actually in partnership with the UK Young Academy and the generous hostility of Oxford University Wolfson College. Every year we host this workshop. So this photo from this workshop that 2 days happened, and actually with 20 attendees from over the seas, from Russia, from Ukraine, Pakistan, Afghanistan, from Burma, Myanmar, from Gaza, from Sudan, from all over the world. And Russian and Ukrainian scholars were sitting together and chatting frankly together. So all of those scientists, at-risk scientists who had to flee their country because of the conflict, because of the persecution, they found this opportunity actually to get involved and build up their capacities to adapt to the new environment in exile. Those are exiles because we know that the first thing in conflict countries, scientists and the scholars are in the whole image, and they are targeted. So I remember when I was originally from Syria, and when I was I didn't think one day before to leave Syria. I was in a good position and producing my knowledge. I work and everything was good until one day when I had been asked to be a parliament member on the ticket of the regime. That's because my family actually I belong to a political family that my uncle was prime minister who was killed by Al-Assad. My father was consulate. The other uncle was minister. Blah blah blah, and those. So they just asked me to be a member of a parliament. And to enhance or to enrich their image in front of the science community. Luckily, at that day, I had been awarded by, actually, it's one award of the first one. I got a fellowship for my postdoc in America, and the other one was additional for this postdoctorate. So, and I told them, I'm happy to contribute and to be a parliament member, but I need to complete my studies to finish this postdoctorate, and I welcome immediately back to take my position. And that's what happened. I just fled because I don't want to be part of this regime. So, and since that day, I fully understand what at-risk scholars means. And since that day, in 2016, I became an advocate for at-risk scholars and academic freedom. And I fully understand what Hafte just mentioned. And I know about that. And I'm so happy that because in 2016, when I started talking about that, there was not enough awareness about what even at-risk scholars mean. So when I need to tell someone how to support at-risk scholars, you need time to explain actually and highlight what does it mean. But I'm so happy now that all of you are aware of this, and this meeting actually aims one of our achieve one of our goals or aims to collect all those efforts under one umbrella, because there are many institutions and bodies that work on this issue, but they don't know each other even to collaborate and coordinate among each other. So this meeting is really an advantage and a privilege, a chance just to work on this also. Again, I want to go back to supporting at-risk scholars and scientists. So it's not, usually when we go about supporting people or supporting at-risk scholars, we go from the humanity perspective. And I will go beyond that. It's about investing in a human capital. You know, those 20 scholars who I met 2 days ago in Oxford University, they came from different backgrounds, from engineering, social science, arts, medical and health, all over the world. And they are enthusiastic and they are eager to contribute to the host institution, to the host community, and they are enthusiastic also to bring the knowledge they produce, to bridge it with their home countries, to rebuild their countries, to build the peace, build justice. And that's what we need to work on for a post-conflict in those countries. So especially in terms, if we want to talk about research institutions, about universities, it's really that collaboration or supporting at-risk scholars' knowledge really matters. So there is an initiative in Global Young Academy, At-Risk Scholars Initiative, that the one actually aimed to how to connect or link at-risk scholars with mentors and experts from all over the world in relative relative disciplines, just to be aware of the new scientific development and adapt to the new environment in the exile. So we have several activities here, but two main things is about the mentorship program, how to every at-risk scholar in this affiliated with this initiative can be mentored by an expert who is relative to his, or he is close to his background or to his field. And the other thing, that development skills workshops that we conduct every year in Oxford University. But still, actually, GYA, Global Young Academy At-Risk Scholars Initiative, there's a huge need actually for more efforts and more support. For example, we have a scholar in Gaza, our colleague. He is a member of Global Young Academy, and he is a member of At-Risk Scholars Initiative, and he is trapped in Gaza, and he is a scientist. He's an amazing scientist. And we could secure a job for him in Canada. And he could secure an appointment in Egypt to get visa to Canada, but he couldn't cross into Egypt. And even when we tried, I could contact United Nations in Egypt to let him go. And the reply was, sorry, it's only for urgent cases. And Samir is still there with 4 children and his young woman. The 4 children, the eldest one is 10 years old. And every night they sleep, and before they sleep, they ask their parents to sleep all together in the same spot. So if they die all together. Can you imagine? This is the dream of a child, to die with his family. This is their dream. So here is the call to action, actually. It's a call on universities, governments, decision makers, and stakeholders how to defend academic freedom as a pillar of peace building and justice. It's not something only related to science and academia. It's something to build societies, countries, communities. It's to provide funding, fellowships, and platforms for scientists and scholars at risk. I conducted a paper about 2 years fellowship. It's not enough. They need at least 2 years fellowship to get rid of the trauma that they have and to adapt to the new environment, and then to start their new journey. So how to extend this? And to support and expand initiatives which demonstrate how global solidarity can protect both people and knowledge, and recognize that sustainable peace is only possible when free inquiry and shared knowledge are safeguarded. So when we defend academic freedom and support displaced scholars, we are doing more than protecting education. We are helping societies heal and grow stronger. In that act, we lay the groundwork for peace and justice that can endure. And thank you so much.